NHC's annual meeting. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it right over to Chris Espy.
Welcome everybody, and thanks for being on the call for NHC's annual meeting. As a reminder, this is where we review the activities and financial information for the organization for the 2016 year. Since we're doing this at mid-year, we'll also provide some updates in the first half of 2017. I am going to present the financial information of the organization, and then we are going to move through research, communications, and policy work from there. So what you see on this slide is NHC's the first part of its balance sheet. You'll note two things. Our temporarily restricted net assets have declined from last year to this year, and this is largely due to foundation-funded activities that were produced in 2016 that were drawing down funding that we had received previously. Specifically, MacArthur Foundation had funded our How Housing Matters conference that we held in December of 2016, and Open Society Foundation funding the Inclusive Communities Working Group. So the spend down on those grants is fairly significant in that area. I would note that our other sort of spend down in our assets was also due to the development of a new database and website that largely occurred during 2015 and the beginning of 2016, and so the investments in that happened earlier and primarily in the 2015 year. On the revenue side, you'll notice that our revenue has declined as well, and I'll talk a little bit about membership a little later, but largely due to NHC receiving a large multi-year grant in 2015 that was all recorded as revenue in 2015. So it really kind of bumped our revenue up, but it's actually being spent out over, particularly the How Housing Matters conference was spent out over 2 years, and the same was true of our Open Society Foundation grant. Those two things alone were over $1 million that were all recorded in 1 year, but spent out over 2 years. So on to the revenue pie chart, you can see where NHC collects its money. And I think important for our members to understand that dues and the gala are two significant ways to support NHC. We have a fairly diverse revenue generation strategy, but the gala and membership really are our two biggest opportunities to support. As I've noted, our grant funding is still important, but it has declined significantly due to several organizations either moving out of housing or reducing their contributions to national organizations. You'll also note our conferences, both that you'll hear about, the solutions conferences for communications and policy are also significant revenue generation for us. On the expense side, we break this down by program services, management, and general and fundraising. You can note that our program expenses were higher in 2016, and this was largely due to the How Housing Matters conference, which again was fully funded by MacArthur. We did not charge for that event, and so all the expenses of that event, which will be held again in 2018, were taken down in 2016. But it's also good to note that both our management, general, and fundraising expenses declined from the previous year as we've continued to seek ways to be more efficient. And then you've got our sort of pie chart on expenses, which again shows the breakdown that 75% of everything we are spending money on is related to program, and obviously some of our management in general actually includes support of our staff doing program activities. So On the financial report, if you want to get a copy of our audited financial statements, all members are eligible to do that. We ask you to email info@nhc.org, and we will send you an electronic version of our audited financial statements for the year. We did have a clean audit, which we're proud of. And then finally, on the membership side, I wanted to emphasize that we've seen a decline in membership, particularly from our smaller size members, lower membership categories. We will be placing a lot of emphasis this fall leading into next year to try to increase our membership support. And so we're hoping that all the folks either on the call or people who are going to watch our annual report will understand how important membership is. If you want to see a list of current NHC members, you can visit our website at www.nhc.org/members. And if you want information on membership, particularly if you have folks you think should be members who are not, that you don't see on the list, please contact Lalitha Marshall at our NHC membership department, and you have the phone number there and her email. And with that, I want to close with just a highlight. In 2017, we held our Housing Visionary Awards Gala back at the beginning of June. We honored Representative Pat Teaberry for his support of the New Markets and Low-Income Housing Tax Credit programs. Habitat for Humanity International and Rebuilding Together received our sort of Housing Innovation Visionary Awards, and for their work in sort of improving the comprehensive nature of their community improvement and partnership and collaboration work at the local level. And we honored Sean Donovan with the Carl Cohen Senior Award for his leadership in the public policy arena, both as Secretary of HUD and then the Director of the Offices of Management and Budget. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Janet, who's the Acting Director of Research.
Thanks, Chris. So NHC's research work really focuses on creating resources to help practitioners, advocates, and policymakers understand the affordable housing needs of Americans and promote best practices and innovations to expand access to affordable housing. So we did this in several ways in 2016, and we focused around several different pillars in our research agenda. The first is housing affordability, and this is really focused on evaluating housing needs, as well as identifying trends and sharing this data with the field at large. And we did this through the publication of our Housing Landscape 2016 report, which looks at how the severe housing cost burdens for low and moderate income working households have changed throughout time across the nation at large, as well as at the metro and state level, to get an idea of whether the housing affordability challenges are growing or improving for working families. We also released our Paycheck to Paycheck database, an accompanying report which looks at housing affordability in a different lens. What it does in the database is actually compare typical incomes for workers in over 80 different occupations to typical housing costs in over 200 metro areas for both homeowners and renters, to really identify who are the kinds of workers that are struggling to find affordable housing in your community. And it can help put a face to the challenges that you are working on. We also shared these results and findings via webinar. We also shared resources and research from other organizations and webinars as well. You can find more information about these reports and others at our website, which is listed below. The other main pillar that we focused on in 2016 is housing intersections. So this is really looking at how housing is a key platform for improving outcomes in education, health, and economic opportunity. And so we've supported this work in several different ways, one of which was hosting the How Housing Matters conference in December, which brought together not just housing practitioners, but also folks from the health, education, and workforce development fields to discuss and explore strategies for more effective collaboration to improve outcomes for low and moderate income households. We also released several profiles of innovative work that highlights these kinds of effective collaborations in various profiles, as well as releasing several research briefs that really took a deep dive on how housing impacts health outcomes, as well as healthcare spending. The other pillar of work that we really focused on in 2016 is promoting inclusive communities. So these are creating opportunities and supporting access to communities where low and moderate income households can access services and pursue educational advancement. And there were several reports that really focused on this work. The first was identifying opportunity through mapping, which really looked at how you can visually identify neighborhoods that provide opportunity to low-income households, whether it's through quality education or job opportunities. We also released a brief called What Makes Inclusionary Zoning Happen, which takes a look at what are the local conditions that make it likely for a community to adopt an inclusionary zoning policy. What are the factors that influence openness to such a policy to expand access to affordable housing? And finally, we also released Separating Fact from Fiction, which is a review of research on the impact of inclusionary housing to identify what elements of these programs determine their success. Looking forward to 2017 and what we've been working on with the research team, we've been working very hard on a new resource for NHC, NHC's Nexus, which is a updated and improved version of what folks might be familiar with, our old housingpolicy.org. And this will serve as a compendium of federal, state, and local affordable housing policies and programs that support access to affordable housing. So it's a great resource to folks interested in learning about different kinds of strategies that they can employ in their community. So that will be launched with NHC's new website. The research team has also been convening a housing and health working group, which gathers practitioners who are at the front end of work to collaborate between the housing and health sectors to expand access to affordable housing as a strategy to address health needs. And this group is really working on developing ideas for scaling up efforts in this area and thinking about how we can create conditions that encourage hospitals and managed care organizations to invest directly in affordable housing development. And finally, keep your eyes peeled for our updated Paycheck to Paycheck release in the fall. This year we're going to not only update the database, but we'll also be releasing a report that focuses on the affordable housing needs of large and rapidly growing healthcare occupations. If you want to learn more about the work that we've done in the last year and a half, you can visit our website. The URL is up there. And with that, I will turn things over to Amy.
Great. Thank you, Janet. I'm going to talk with you today about our communications program, which has three main components: monitoring public opinion of affordable housing and housing issues, values-based messaging and other scientifically backed communications practices, and building support for affordable housing and countering community opposition. I'll focus on the latter two, as these are the areas we concentrated on most in the last year and a half. So first, values-based messaging. Thanks to cognitive science, we know a lot about how all of us process information and how and why some messages succeed while others fail. Our goal in this work is to distill that research that's out there that's been done both in other fields as well as in housing, and make it accessible and useful to our members and to the affordable housing community at large. I've provided this information to our members in the field through in-person trainings and workshops, as well as through webinars. The messaging webinar we held this year in partnership with NHC member enterprise community partners drew over 1,100 registrants, making it our most popular webinar ever. And the image you see here is from Enterprise's presentation during that webinar. We've also made an effort to integrate these messaging best practices in our advocacy work. This year's Budget Forum webinar provided practical advice on communicating effectively about the value of affordable housing programs to policymakers across the political spectrum. And we've worked with coalitions like the Campaign for Housing and Community Development Funding to share messaging that works. Second, building support for affordable housing. In our view, there are really two main challenges to developing affordable housing. The first is getting the funding and the policy in place to do it, and the second is getting support from the communities in which we want to build. Our work on building support and countering community opposition is designed to meet that second need. And it's a real issue. I've talked with affordable housing developers who said that they lose up to 50% of their planned developments each year to community opposition. So this is a problem we really need to solve as a community. Solutions for Housing Communications, you see the logo here. It's our primary vehicle for this work. This is an annual convening that draws around 125 housing communicators each year to learn about communications, organizing, and advocacy techniques that will help them build support for their work and short-circuit community opposition. We held this convening in New York City in 2016 and in Minneapolis in 2017. The plenary sessions from Solutions 2017 are available online, and I encourage you to visit our website, nhc.org. Click on Communications 2017 under the Events tab and follow the link to view the plenary conversations. I think you'll get a lot out of them. We've also held some smaller conversations and workshops in the area of building support. Last July, I organized a half-day forum in partnership with Housing Colorado on countering community opposition. This featured workshops and panels, as well as the opportunity for participants to begin developing their own messaging to use to build support for their work in the field. So in closing, I'll say that the communications program is really a growing area of work for NHC. We've seen a real hunger for this information in the field, and I think there are a lot of opportunities on the horizon for us to partner with our members to ensure that the absolute best communications practices are accessible and incorporated into all of your work. So with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Amy. I'm Rebecca Kane. I'm a policy associate here at NHC. I'm just going to do a quick run through of what we've been doing over the past year and a half. And my presentation is organized into three areas: our working groups, our events, and our policy activities. So you'll see across those three categories that our policy work really reflects the diversity of our membership and the diversity of the affordable housing spectrum. So I find it really interesting. I'm going to start with Strong Voices. This is an effort we launched in 2017. It's an effort to coordinate advocacy among national housing organizations. So we are just working to provide some cohesiveness, some unity here in DC among our partners as we enter this difficult budget cycle. So we've convened 3 meetings so far, developed some shared values, and are planning to keep this group active and meet monthly going forward. I also want to touch on inclusive communities. This has been a big area of work for the policy team, as well as communications and research. It's been NHC-wide. This was focused on convening a community of state, local, and regional housing officials on inclusionary housing and affordability in both rental and homeownership. This 2-year program, for lack of a better word, actually is ending now in San Jose this week. But we held 11 meetings with our group of folks from across the country, with folks representing California, Minnesota, Boston. It's a good list of really interesting housing markets. We also held 5 internal webinars for the group to help them learn from each other, and took some of their expertise and experience to provide a webinar for NHC's membership on Portland's restorative justice and preference policies, as well as crafting an opportunity mapping brief that Janet mentioned, and both are available on our website. We also convene our Restoring Neighborhoods Task Force monthly and provide webinars, which are available on our website. We're looking at comprehensive community development solutions, so you'll find a real range of interesting topics that practitioners are deploying in the field. Around broadband, we are really working to encourage broadband in affordable housing. So we're partnering with Everyone On in HUD and their Connect Home program. I spoke at the expansion event in May and at the Shelby conference on June 1st on really looking at public housing and broadband, but we continue to explore this topic and are holding a webinar tomorrow on HUD's Connect Home program. Moving on to our events, I won't touch on our budget forum because Amy covered that well. Our Solutions for Affordable Housing Conference is our national policy convening. We held it in December 2016 with over 200 housing stakeholders, and we are planning another convening for 2017. And we also just held our annual policy symposium. HUD Secretary Ben Carson provided our keynote address, and we had great panels with Habitat for Humanity and Rebuilding Together on connecting diverse interests in community development, and also a really strong panel on flood insurance. And the webcast is available on our website. I encourage you to check it out. And lastly, you can see a laundry list of our policy activities. I'm just going to hit on a couple. We are really engaged, as you may have gleaned already, in floods and disasters. NHC is participating in the Smarter, Safer Coalition to bring an affordable housing perspective to this work. And the reason for that is the National Flood Insurance Program is up for reauthorization. And there's a real good opportunity for reform to make the program stronger and benefit consumers. So NHC is very involved in that work. We also continue to be very engaged around housing finance reform. We facilitated a Federal Housing Finance Agency roundtable with CAP on the duty to serve rule. Ethan Handelman co-authored an article on multifamily housing finance reform for the Urban Institute's incubator site. And we continue to engage with stakeholders as FHFA rolled out the duty to serve rule and the underserved markets plans, which we are planning to comment on. And the last thing that I want to touch on is rental housing. We did some interesting work that was a little new for us in 2016 around income averaging in the low-income housing tax credit program. We partnered with the New York Housing Conference and CHC in California to create fact sheets that they could use in advocacy around income averaging specifically. We also partnered with the Urban Institute and created a data visualization tool on the cost gap in rental housing finance and why it's so hard to make affordable housing deals work, which I think you will all find very valuable, and they are on the policy tools section of our website. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris to close us out.
Okay, so I think, Rebecca, do folks have the ability to ask questions if there are any?
Yes.
I just wanted to check if folks have questions about any of the work or the finances, you can ask them through the GoToMeeting webinar. But we did want to make sure you knew how to get in touch with us, either through our Facebook page and particularly our Twitter account at National Housing or nationalhousing.conf. How's the best way to say the Twitter handle as you see on the slide, and www.nhc.org. Our website, as Rebecca and or everyone had mentioned, the sort of rollout of our new website, I think, will be a significant resource opportunity for folks in the coming months, as you will see the Nexus database resource center that Janet mentioned, as well as, I think, increased functionality to find resources that we've updated and be more engaged in our events. We're also hoping that more of our members will be involved in our policy discussions. I'll be doing a special sort of monthly outreach to our leadership and full membership members to try to sort of highlight opportunities for engagement and input. We have, I think, a particularly unique opportunity in this administration with a lot of new folks coming into HUD, an administration that has not set a lot of direction around housing policy yet, and I think some big issues in front of us like housing finance reform, tax reform, and I think a real rethinking of the regulatory framework around which housing happens. We obviously have some major challenges around funding issues that Rebecca has talked about, and will continue to play a major role in that efforts to bring the field together to have a more coordinated response to housing education and advocacy, and most importantly, a more coherent message that national organizations can be using, but also can be utilized in mobilization of state and local folks, so that we So I think we have a question. Do you want to read it?
Sure. We got a question from Chip Halbach. Does NHC have a multi-year plan with our 3 to 5 year direction? And if so, what is it?
Thanks, Chip. So NHC developed a strategic plan 3 years ago that really laid out a direction for us that was new for the organization, and that we were really consciously focusing half of our time and activities on work at the regional, state, and local level. And this was I guess, interpreted differently depending on whether it was the policy, communications, or research sort of work. We will, I think, be giving the funding shift at the national level and the foundation support. We will be undertaking a review of that in the coming months, probably going into 2018, that will probably have increased focus at the federal level because of the challenges and opportunities that I noted, and thinking about what is our role, what is our future work around research and communications need to be in this new environment, and how do we do this, how do we continue our work and engagement with our members and the field writ large, given the likely funding constraints that the broader field may be going through if there are fewer resources in the affordable housing community development space. And so our ability to reach people through webinars and other sort of non-travel expense related vehicles, I think, is going to be an important part of that strategy. But also how we are bringing folks into the policy discussion in Washington will be an important piece. Obviously some of that is defensive around funding, but also to make sure that they are really hearing from practitioners across the spectrum when they are setting policy directions. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks to NHC staff for their involvement in putting this together, and thanks to all of you for being members of NHC and taking time to be on the call. And we hope many more members will take advantage of the archived version of this annual meeting that will be available on our website. Thank you.